He didn't come back looking for anyone. Not a name. Not a face. He came back because the city kept calling him, in small quiet ways, in dreams, in half-forgotten sounds, in the way certain evenings felt heavier than others. It had been more than 40 years since he last walked these streets. Back then, the buildings were lower, the roads were rougher, and everything smelled of smoke, rain, and urgency. Now, the city stood taller, cleaner, almost unfamiliar. He stood at the edge of the sidewalk, leaning lightly on his cane, watching cars pass by with no memory of what had once happened here. People moved past him. Young people, couples, tourists taking photos of a city that survived, something they would never know. This was where they had held the line. Right here. He remembered the sound first, not explosions, not shouting, but boots on wet pavement, running beside his. They were young then. Too young to understand what war would take from them later. He could almost hear their laughter, the kind that slipped out at the wrong moments when fear had nowhere else to go. He closed his eyes. Just for a moment, the years fell away. The tall glass buildings faded, and in their place stood sandbags, broken walls, and long nights without sleep. This street was where he had last seen them together. The night before everything changed. They didn't say much. No speeches. No promises. Just a shared cigarette. A nod. A quiet understanding that tomorrow would ask for more. Then they had left. He survived that night. Not all of them did. And some, like him, survived in ways that were harder to explain. Now he walked slowly, one step at a time, following a path his body remembered better than his mind. Here was the corner, where they waited for orders that never came. Here was the wall he leaned against, counting breaths. Here was the doorway, where fear finally caught up with him. 81 days. The number still lived in his bones. 81 days of captivity, of silence, of learning how long a night could truly be. He didn't like to talk about it. Most people didn't know. Some things, once spoken, never return to being quiet. But the city knew. The city remembered. He reached a small park. He didn't remember being there before. A bench beneath an old tree. Leaves falling slowly. Without urgency, he sat down. For the first time since arriving, he allowed himself to rest. Around him, life continued gently. A dog tugged at its leash. A child laughed somewhere nearby. A breeze moved through the branches. Peaceful. The kind of peace that exists only because something terrible once ended. He thought about the men who never came back, about the ones who did but never truly returned, about who he was before the war taught him how fragile everything could be. He wondered if they would recognize him now, not his face, but the man he had become, slower, quieter, carrying fewer words. He placed his hand on the bench, felt the rough grain of the wood, real, solid. This was his reunion, not with the person, but with the version of himself that had been left behind. And then he realized something. He hadn't come here to remember the pain. He had come to see what survived. The city survived. He survived. And somehow that alone was enough for today. As the light softened and the shadows grew longer, he stood up slowly. He looked down the street one last time. No salutes. No goodbyes, just a quiet acknowledgement of everything that had been carried and everything that could finally be set down. He turned and walked away, leaving the city to its evening sounds and taking with him a small, steady peace he hadn't felt in years. And if this moment feels familiar, I'm here listening. You're not alone.